So let's talk about the upcoming Xbox Series X, because according to this article and according to this rumor, it looks like the Xbox Series X UI is reportedly only running at 1080p resolutions. And as an upcoming owner of a Series X, should you be worried about these low resolutions on the home screen and the user interface of the system? Honestly, if you were to ask me, and I think a lot of people, I don't necessarily think it is a big deal that the Series X only runs at 1080p when you're on the user interface. Sure, it's not the greatest, and it is going to be slightly jarring when you're going from games that are 4K resolution back to the home screen and the user interface at 1080p, so it should be kind of noticeable. To be honest, because we're pretty much talking about double the resolution when we go from a game back to the home screen of the system, or anytime you do interact with the user interface. But honestly, I don't think this is a big deal, because most of the time when you're actually on a game console's primary function, of course, is going to be playing games. And since you are going to be playing games most of the time on these systems, it's not really a big deal because you will be playing a game all the time. I will still say it is kind of a bummer that the UI apparently only runs at 1080p resolution. I thought with the power inside, especially the more expensive Series X at $500, I would assume at least the user interface would be like 1440p or 4K, but there may actually be reasons behind this. Maybe they wanted to save some RAM management when it comes to the UI, and they didn't want the UI hogging all the power of the system, because maybe if they had it a little bit higher than 1080p, maybe it would make games run worse than what they already run at. So maybe that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to make sure that the user interface was stable, was fast, and they wanted to pretty much save all the power for the games. That's what I'm assuming here. And if that means that they had to save all the power for the games, of course, and make the user interface kind of a low resolution compared to the games, I mean, of course, I think most people would agree you would take the trade-off between games being a higher resolution or the UI being a higher resolution. I think that's kind of obvious here. And honestly, 1080p is not that low. It's not like the same situation we have with the Nintendo Switch, because if you ever used a Nintendo Switch, of course, you will know that with a Nintendo Switch system, the Nintendo Switch UI is only at 720p. And when you're playing games at 1080p and going back to 720p, it is pretty jarring, and it is kind of grainy to look at the user interface on the Nintendo Switch. But again, just like Microsoft here, I'm pretty sure Nintendo did that to save resources for the video games and make sure that the UI wasn't hogging all the resources. So again, I'm okay with that. And there is a post right here which is kind of interesting. It says, well, the big problem for me more than anything with the Xbox Dash is the low resolution. I was disappointed with Xbox One X only offering 1080p UI rendering when PS4 Pro did native 4K, but for 1080p UI to continue on Series X, that's really not acceptable for me. I mean, I agree too. It shouldn't be 1080p, but honestly, again, first of all, 1080p is still full HD, and you do have to realize if they had to make sacrifices again, I am okay with them putting a low resolution on the UI if that means the games are more stable and have better performance at the end of the day. It's not the end of the world to me, and you're not really gonna notice that much of a difference. And it's not like we're talking about a really grainy UI. 1080p is still 1080p. It just sucks that it will be kind of jarring going from a game back to the home screen, back to the home screen or user interface, but it is what it is at the end of the day, and it is kind of disappointed. Maybe in the near future, if this is actually true, what Microsoft may end up doing is they could push out a UI update to actually give the UI a higher resolution than 1080p, but most of the time, again, it's not really a big deal. Now, let's move on to another video, because according to this article, it looks like Yakuza Like a Dragon is going to be only playable at 900p on the upcoming Xbox Series S. And honestly, should you be concerned about this if you are going to be an owner of a Series S from Microsoft? Of course, keep in mind the Xbox Series X is actually the smaller version of the Series X, and this one I think only costs I want to say $299. I think this system is the same price as the current Nintendo Switch regular. And honestly, I'm a little shocked at this article that comes out that said Yakuza Like a Dragon is only going to be playing at resolutions of 900p, just because 900p is not really acceptable nowadays, especially with next generation hardware, and especially with the Xbox Series S. The Xbox Series S, I think right now, is actually touted at a 1440p machine. I think a 2K or 2.5K machine. Either way, it's higher than full HD, higher than 1080p. At least that's what Microsoft claims with this system. So it is kind of a shocker to see that a game on the Xbox Series S is only running at 900p. Of course, it'll depend on each individual developer, how well they know how to develop their games, what type of source code they're using, what type of engine they're using. There is a whole bunch of things you do have to take in consideration when it comes to game developing and game coding, and I'm not really a game developer, so I can't speak for this, and maybe Yakuza Like a Dragon was just too much for the system to handle to run at 900p. Even if this game, they couldn't get to run at resolutions higher than 900p, which is not even full HD, which is kind of a slap in the face, honestly, just because you would think at least 1080p would be the standard moving forward. Again, maybe they had no choice here, but the real thing to take away from this article and to take away from Yakuza Like a Dragon, apparently if it only runs at 900p, what other games on the actual system are going to run at sub HD? This is pretty much unacceptable if you ask me, because we're talking sub HD. This is the type of things you would see on current gen consoles. There still are a few games out there that do come out or are on the system that only play at sub HD, especially more so with the Nintendo Switch, of course. The Nintendo Switch is running the Tegra X1 processor, and that is a mobile-based chipset, and of course a lot of games just can't hit full HD, so a lot of them in the dock either run at like sub HD 900p, or for instance they even run lower. I've seen games run as low as like 500p or 720p, and of course that is just not great news. And honestly, this does actually kind of have me concerned, just because if this game is only running at 900p on the Series S, which is $299, then there could be other games on the market that could only run at sub HD, so this is not great news. And another thing to take in consideration with the Series S, unlike what Sony is doing with the PS5, you guys know Sony makes two versions of the PS5, but they both have the same power inside both PS5s. Whether you buy the digital version or whether you buy the regular version of the PS5, you are going to be getting the same power under the hood. But with the Series S, you are actually getting a dumbed down version of the Series X with slightly less power. Sure, it's running on the same architecture and things like that, but honestly, if this is true again and this is only running at 900p, it pretty much kind of scares me. Does this mean this developer's engine was just too much for the system, or does this mean that they really couldn't get it developed for the system because it didn't have enough power? And if that's the case, I can honestly see other games coming out and not hitting full HD. And again, this is pretty much a pretty big deal, because this is not even 1080p, and we're talking about next generation, and at least next generation, bare minimum, at least put a game at 1080p. So it kind of concerns me, and this kind of makes me want to answer the question, should you buy the Series S over the Series X now that we know there's a game on there that runs at 900p, which is pretty much what you would be getting on current gen systems, whether it's the Xbox One or the PS4. Of course, it kind of seems like this is last generation game and shouldn't have any business on something like the Xbox Series S, just because it only runs at 900p. So it really doesn't feel like a next generation game with resolutions of 900p. And I also want to know if the Xbox Series X is actually going to hold back games in the long run, just due to the fact that now they have two systems. And you do have to realize, with all these games, all the games that come out for the Xbox Series consoles do actually have to work on both systems. So if you develop a game for Series S, you have to make sure it runs on the Series X, and it has to do that. And that's kind of ridiculous, because I feel like a lot of developers are going to be like, yeah, the Series S, even though it runs on the same architecture, it runs on the same engine and stuff like that, it might hold back our games, and some of our games might have to be scaled back because they just won't run properly. And this is a sign that we're going to be seeing some games that just don't run properly. And yeah, 900p is not that low, to be honest, to begin with. It's not like we're talking about 720p here or anything too crazy or too grainy. 900p is still 900p, but just due to the fact that it is 900p on a next generation system, honestly, it's kind of unacceptable. And honestly, I wouldn't be too surprised if other games come to the Series S and couldn't even hit full HD. But this is just pretty much a slap in the face to the Series S, honestly. But I don't know really what's going on with Yakuza Like a Dragon, but this whole article is actually pretty interesting. Now let's actually move over to some tech news, because I do want to talk about the brand new iPad Air 4. Now, I covered the brand new iPad Air 4 on my YouTube channel, and I talked about how it is a very good tablet. Now it looks like all the reviews are finally out for this device, and all I can really say is, yeah, this is a pretty amazing device, honestly. And honestly, if I was to ask myself which iPad would I actually go for now that the iPad Air 4 is out, I would personally consider the iPad Air 4 for a number of different reasons. Sure, it's not the one that everyone should go for just because they do have a budget option for the iPad. They do have the iPad 8th generation, which is pretty much the cheapest iPad you can actually buy, and at $330, I do believe, that tablet is an amazing deal. And if you just need an iPad to work, that thing is amazing for what you're getting. But for everybody else who needs a little bit more power under the hood, or if you want a modern design, the iPad Air 4 is really the device to actually go for. And now that the iPad Air 4 is actually out to the public and it's starting to roll out, and you can almost officially buy this from Apple, I will have to agree with a lot of these reviewers and a lot of these websites saying that this is the tablet you should go for if you want a premium iPad, because now with this thing being out on the market, it's kind of like, why even sell an iPad Pro? There's almost no reason to sell it. Sure, you do get some benefits, don't get me wrong, of having the iPad Pro. Like, for instance, you do get a slightly bigger screen from 10.9 to 11 inches on the base iPad Pro, and then you do have a 12.9-inch option. You also get, I think, a better screen, because you do get a Pro Motion display, where this one is a slower refresh rate screen. But honestly, those downsides aren't that big a deal, and I think for most people, honestly, most people should probably go for the iPad Air 4 just because you do get that modern design, you do get a fast device, and it is a pretty good deal at the price they're actually charging for this iPad. I think it starts at $599 for this device, and I think if you were to consider the iPad Pro, it just doesn't make sense. Sure, you do get some extra features, but I don't think those features are enough to justify like the extra $100 to $200 even for the iPad Pro base model, the 11-inch model. Now, I think this is the iPad everyone should go for if they want a premium device. Sure, I'm not saying that the iPad Pro is a device you should never consider or it should never be made, because of course there is still, like I said again, there is still benefits of having that, like the Pro Motion display. You do get a slightly bigger screen. I heard that the speakers might be slightly better in that device, but overall this pretty much just seems like an iPad Pro Lite. That's pretty much what Apple could have called this device. I think they could have called this the iPad Pro iPad Pro Lite, and I think everyone would have understood that as well, because that's pretty much what we're talking about here. If you were to consider this over the previous iPad Air 3, what I will say is this one's almost like a no-brainer, because at least you do get a better sound system here, you do get a better design here, a bigger screen here, so it's kind of like a no-brainer. At least go for this over the previous iPad Air 3 if you ever see that flowing around, unless that thing's just at a heavy discount, of course, then go for that device. But overall, this device is an amazing device, and here's some stuff that Engadget actually said about this device. There are some problems with this, but for the majority of people, I do believe, even if you are a workhorse, I do think this is the device to go for. And the nice thing about this, just like all the iPad Pros, you do have access to the Magic Keyboard, not just to Folio Smart keyboard, so you can use that as well. And I really do think that is a game changer, and I have used that keyboard, and that keyboard is expensive, yes, but it is a game changer, especially if you do a lot of typing, whether it's documents, emails, whatever the case may be. That keyboard is an amazing thing, and that's another reason to buy this thing, because you do have more keyboard options, whereas the base iPad 7th generation doesn't have as much keyboard options to begin with. So yeah, $599, it almost checks every mark for even the pro consumer, and honestly, an amazing device. And yeah, this is one of the best tablets on the market to date. Now let's actually move over to the final story, or the final topic for today's video. I kind of wanted to talk about MagSafe on the brand new iPhone 12 line, just because I think this is very interesting, and I kind of wanted to talk about some rumors and speculations that have been floating around even before the iPhone 12s were ever out or anything like that. But basically what I want to talk about is not even the iPhone 12 line specifically, more so I want to talk about what's after the iPhone 12 line. I know it's crazy that the iPhone 12 line is not even officially fully rolled out to the public yet, and we're already talking about like the iPhone 13 or the iPhone 14. But now that Apple has finally rolled out the iPhone 12 line and it officially supports MagSafe, I do believe a lot of those rumors that were floating around a long time ago, this kind of really does feel like, with this whole MagSafe situation, I kind of feel like with the next generation of the iPhone 13 or the iPhone 14, I really do feel like Apple is officially going to discontinue one big feature of phones forever, and that is going to be the charging port. I feel like they purposely did two things to get people ready for the removal of the actual charging port. One is, with the brand new iPhone 12 line, for the very first time, you're not going to be getting a charger in the box. Sure, you do actually get a cable in the box to charge the phone, but you don't get a brick anymore in the box. And another thing they did, of course, is the MagSafe situation. Now you do have a MagSafe charger, which pretty much magnetically connects to the back of the device, which is pretty easy to connect and pretty nice. And I think with those two things that Apple did with the iPhone 12, I think they're gearing people towards the fact that next generation or the generation after, they're going to remove the charging port on the iPhone. And honestly, it wouldn't shock me, and I think if anyone's going to do it, it is going to be Apple, because the stage is set up perfectly for this. Again, they're not including a charger in the box with the 12, and they are selling a separate accessory called the MagSafe charger that magnetically attaches to the back of the device. And I think this is a perfect combination for not actually allowing us to have a charging port on the device, because next generation, when they don't put a charging port on the device, they can say, yeah, I don't think consumers are going to be really be too concerned about this, or like be too surprised about this, just because last generation we gave us a MagSafe charger, and then of course we removed the charging brick in the actual box. And I really do think they are going to do this, just because if you look at what Apple has done, they've done some pretty big moves in the tech industry. Like, for instance, a long time ago, I think they were the first company out there to remove the CD-ROM drive from their MacBooks. And then, of course, one of the more recent ones has definitely been the removal of the actual headphone jack, and the headphone jack doesn't exist anymore in modern day smartphone technology, at least for the most part. So yeah, you can thank Apple for this, and this is why they're actually doing this. And I do think this is actually going to be not too devastating and not too bad if they do decide to remove the charging port, just because MagSafe is actually a much more better technology than something like a standard wireless charger. It's kind of funny if they do remove the charging port on the upcoming next iPhone, with just making users pretty much use a wireless charger or a MagSafe charger. It is kind of funny. Technically, they're removing the charging port, but you still will pretty much kind of be forced to use your iPhone with some type of wire, whether you like it or not. You just won't use it in the same traditional way you did before, with plugging it into the bottom of the device. You'll have one that attaches to the back with a magnet, or you'll use a standard wireless charger that just lays on top of your phone. But I really do think this is coming in the near future, and honestly, this wouldn't surprise me. And they're going to claim something like, yeah, the charging port is useless, and it just honestly doesn't make sense, and we have to move technology forward. And I think the iPhone 12 line really does show all the signs that they are going to chop the charging port once and for all. The one thing I never really liked prior to MagSafe coming out is the fact that with traditional wireless charging, I never liked the fact that it was really hard to use the phone if you had to use the phone while it was charging. What are you going to do? Duct tape the whole wireless charging around your smartphone? That's something I don't like, because I know a lot of users out there with their smartphone, their tablet, their laptop, they like using their device while it's being charged. And with a traditional wireless charger, it's kind of hard to use your device when it's actually being wirelessly charged. But with MagSafe, that's a little bit different, just because it magnetically attaches to the back of your device. So I do think it is a little bit more stable and a little bit more secure. And for the most part, from what I've seen, you can actually use the MagSafe charger while you're actually charging it. You can actually use your smartphone. So I think that's kind of great technology. The only thing I want to know is with next generation or the generation after, if I am right and all these rumors do hold up and Apple would actually remove the lightning port or the port on the actual bottom of the actual device, my only question is, are they going to include something like the MagSafe charger in the box? Because a lot of people nowadays still don't even have a charger to begin with when it comes to wireless charging. First of all, wireless chargers are kind of expensive, and a lot of people see it as like this kind of afterthought, since most of the time it charges a little bit slower. You have to buy it as an accessory. It's not cheap to begin with. So are they going to include one or not? I can see them maybe not including one, since they don't include a regular charger in the box with the iPhone 12, at least the power brick. But then again, I can maybe see them including something like the MagSafe charger with the upcoming iPhones in the future, just to get people on board with this whole, oh, there's no charging port with your device, we'll throw in a MagSafe charger just to make you feel a little bit better, even though it may make the box bigger. I know that sounds crazy, since they just removed the charging port, and they talk about all this stuff about eco-friendly and stuff like that. I can still see that be a thing, just so it can ease people's minds, because these MagSafe chargers are kind of expensive to begin with. You can see $39. I think most people agree that's not too crazy, considering it is a pretty big charger and it just magnetically attaches on your phone. But just the fact it is $39 is still kind of expensive, and especially when you have to buy an iPhone that is pretty expensive to begin with, it doesn't really feel good to have to go out and buy this, especially on the next iteration of the iPhone. If they were to remove the port, like the lightning port, or remove the charging port altogether. But just something to think about here. And yeah, that's pretty much going to do it for today's episode. Anyway, guys, this is Wayne from My Tech News, signing out.